Good afternoon and welcome to Return of the Remnant. I pray you're having a blessed Sabbath today. I just had a few things I wanted to kind of talk about. Sorry it's been a while since I've been on, but just been busy preparing and getting myself ready. Both of us here are just trying to prepare and wait on the Lord and be ready for whatever comes. But no doubt, many people have been talking about this eclipse that's going to happen on April 8th. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm going to give you my opinions on where I believe we're at on the prophetic timeline. Also talk about maybe the key event within that timeline that helps us make a determination where we are at in Revelation. And I'm going to also end with one of the most important things that we need to remember so that we're not deceived in these end days. So I put up here first on this just this discussion here the time and date map of the United States, and many of you have already studied this and looked at it, so I'm not going to go into too many details. But we know in 2017 we had this eclipse that kind of went through this way across the United States in 2017. And in case you don't remember, many of those cities, quite a few of those cities that eclipse went through, had the name of Salem. And so we know what Salem and Shalom, Jerusalem, what that means. And interestingly, in 2024, on next Monday, we're going to have another eclipse that, as you can see on this map, is going to kind of come up through Mexico, through the United States, and exit into Canada, continuing eastward bound. And this is going to be a little bit longer. I believe it's going to start about noon at the tip of Texas, and it'll end around 3:34 o'clock when it leaves the United States out of Maine. But what is interesting when you take a look at this is that one of the first cities in Texas that the path of this eclipse goes through is a town named Jonah. And after that, I couldn't see any towns named Nineveh before that, but I'm sure you have seen several teachings out there where people have talking about the 7 Ninevehs that this eclipse will go through. And there's also areas out there that are fact checking saying that, well, there's only 2 cities named Nineveh. Well, 2 or 7, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is the fact that this path of this eclipse is going to go through a town named Jonah first, and then it is going to be going through a couple towns named Nineveh. If you take a look, there are some people out there that are just saying, hey, this is just an eclipse. I'm going to go out, I'm going to enjoy it. And you know what? That's your prerogative. That's fine. I want to go into scripture, though, and show that anything that happens in the heavens, whether it's planetary alignments, whether it's comets, and by the way, there's going to be what's called the Devil's Comet that is going to be seen on that day as well. There's a lot of very strange things that are going to be happening that day. But if you will, let's go to Genesis 1:14. If you could go there, you can see in Genesis 1:14 in the creation account, Elohim said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky, or in the dome of the sky, to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times, days, and years, or appointed times, moedims, and let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, obviously the sun, and the lesser light to govern the night, which is the moon. He also made the stars, the wandering stars, aka the planets. We're also going to have on this day of April 8th a planetary alignment of about 4 planets. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it's 4 planets. So a lot of things going on. Now, to me, this is just my opinion, but if you go back into ancient cultures, whether it's the Mayans, the Aztecs, ancient Egyptians, Assyrians, Sumerians, many of their writings, when they talk about events that happen like this, they're usually not good. Many ancient cultures believed that they were bad omens. And I'm not saying this to scare anybody at all. I'm just saying that a lot of times um, these type of events are to warn us about something. And for an example, if we go into the book of Jonah, we know the story of Jonah, how God wanted him to go to Nineveh to preach against that wicked city for all the sin and wickedness that it had been doing. And but Jonah understood what was going to happen in the future, that this same kingdom would come and basically take away the northern kingdom. I think he knew enough of this to say he didn't want to do it and he wanted to flee. Well, interestingly, when you're reading Jonah and Jonah comes, after he's swallowed by that great fish and he's in the belly of this fish, and then he gets spewed out on land, and he is told again by God to go to Nineveh and preach against that wicked city. And so what he does, he goes there. And isn't it interesting that the impact that Jonah had on the city of Nineveh, so much so that the king had a decree that everyone there, whether they were people or animals, that they would all fast. And God relented. God relented of a coming judgment on that city. And you have to sometimes ask yourself, how was it that Jonah had such authority that the people would just automatically believe him when he got there? And I believe this is something I talked about back in 2017, a teaching I did for the Lamb Network, that back in 2017, that eclipse had people thinking about other eclipses that had happened in the past. And there's a way you can go online and not only look through software, but also you can look at ancient astronomical events from cultures, ancient cultures. And one was in Nineveh. There was a total solar eclipse that dated around June 15th of 763 BC, which many people, including myself, believe that this was probably during the time of Jonah. And I believe that this event happened, that all the people in Nineveh saw, and then all of a sudden God has Jonah on the scene just shortly after that. And when Jonah comes through the city and says, hey, 40 days and Nineveh's going to be overthrown, they believed on it. They saw this event, as I said before, of all many of the ancient cultures that believed that this was a prophetic warning or a bad omen. And then here this prophet comes in boldly and says, 40 days in Nineveh, it will be overthrown. And to me, that sets the stage for this event. Again, I'm not saying that this is 100% correct. I'm just giving you my opinion on it. But I really believe that this eclipse that is going to happen on Monday in just a couple days is going to be a prophetic a prophetic event by God of judgment upon the path that this eclipse goes over, which is America. I'm sure if you've tuned in this channel, um, you know that we are no longer the nation we used to be. We're very much a wicked nation, and we rightly deserve judgment. We rightly deserve judgment on this country. So, what should we do? I'm not telling anybody what they should do on this day. If they want to go see the eclipse, whatever it is you want to do or whatever you feel called to do, you go ahead and do that. But as for me and my house, what we feel like we want to do on this day is maybe get out and pray. Uh, we're thinking about going around on our property and praying around our property. Um, asking the Lord for guidance, um, and to repent and to do all we can to get right with the Lord. Um, so I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm just kind of saying what we're doing, and if you're looking to do the same thing, just put that in the comments. I'd appreciate that. It'd be nice to see if people were also looking at it that way. But if anything, I think it's also important, especially in these last days that we're in, that if you're a prepper, that we really need to be looking at prepping, and not only prepping physically and mentally, but prepping spiritually, getting right with God, listening to his still small voice, and getting things ready. I'll give you just a little checklist. Do you have an ample water supply? Where do you get your water from? Is it city water? If it's city water, do you have other redundancies, other ways of getting water? Do you have water stored up in your home that's drinkable? Do you have a way to purify water? That's just one aspect. Here at our place, we have several different ways of getting water, whether it's rain collection, whether it's from our well, whether it's other areas that I don't want to really get into. But it's always good. It's kind of the military thing. Two is one and one is none. And if you can find some different ways of gathering water, outstanding. Uh, how about your food stocks? Are you storing up food, not only canned good, but dried food? Do you have any animals on your property? Do you have a way? Do you have a milking animal, perhaps? Do you have eggs that you get from chickens? Um, do you have anything like that? Do you have a fishing pond? Um, Also shelter, defense, alternative currency. Do you have alternative energy? Do you have a generator? Do you have uh, anything that extra gas? Do you have a propane? Anything that runs off of propane? Do you have solar? Um, just things like that. And I would really consider. Look, folks. When you look at the dollar and you look at what it's worth today, it's only a smart call, if you can afford it, to buy some of the assets now that you need, because they're going to be even that much more valuable when, not if, but when things go down. We don't know how they're going to go down, but one day they're going to go down. The electricity is not going to always be here. And with that being said, getting back to prepping, so not only having solar, but do you have Faraday cages? Do you have a place to put in sensitive electronics, like maybe a ham radio or other communications and devices that, if an EMP hits, whether it's nuclear or solar from the sun, do you have um, a way to protect that? Do you have backup plans? So all these things I would be really thinking about, and start looking at these things if you haven't already been doing so. But continue to do those things. That's one of the very few things that we can control. We can't control what goes on in the world, but we can control how we prepare for what's coming. um so where are we at on the prophetic timeline? Let's go to Revelation 6, talking about the seals. Now, again, this is just my opinion. If you want more detailed information on my thoughts on Revelation and where we're at, who I think the Antichrist is, who I think Mystery Babylon is, you can go on this YouTube channel, Return the Remnant. And I did some teachings in the Philippines to some Messianic congregations in 2020, and they won't say exactly that. They'll say session 1, session 2, session 3. I talk about uh, hybridization of mankind. I talk about where we're at in the prophetic timeline based on several biblical references and non-biblical references. Um, And again, as I said, I talk about a possibility of who the Antichrist could be. And also, we have enough evidence to show exactly where Mystery Babylon is, where it's located at. So, where are we at on the prophetic timeline? So, in Revelation chapter 6, I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we'll discuss it. But it says, I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the seven seals. And who is the Lamb? The Lamb is Yeshua HaMashiach. Then I heard one of the four living creatures say in a voice like thunder, Come. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. And again, I'm reading this out of the NIV version. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, Come. Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, Come. I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the four living creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. When the Lamb opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, Come. I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. They called out in a loud voice, How long, Yahweh Tsevaot, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood? Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer until the full number of their fellow servants, their brothers and sisters, were killed just as they had been. I watched as he, Yeshua, opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to earth as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The heavens receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and everyone else, both slave and free, hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it? So here we have the first six seals of Revelation. And I know there are some people out there that truly believe that the first seal was the COVID pandemic. And it very well could be. But to me, I really believe that the world itself has to change, that a new kingdom has to rise on this earth, whether through war, through collapse of economies, uh, just take your pick. And when you look at these seals, I think these seals all deal with the Antichrist, that he's going to come on the scene looking, he's going to be on the scene conquesting and taking over countries, as we read about in Daniel. And then we see all these things kind of fall in line, that there's wars and there's death and there's famine. And then when you look at death and Hades, all those things that you see with the power to kill by sword, famine, and plague, wild beasts of the earth, those are all the curses, I believe, of Leviticus 26. I pretty sure it's Leviticus 26. I don't think it's Leviticus 24. I think it's Leviticus 26. The curses for not obeying Yahweh. And then obviously the fifth seal is martyrdom. And I know there's some people out there that truly believe we're in the fifth seal right now, but I'm here to tell you, even though there is an increase in persecution around the world, we haven't seen anything yet. And I believe this is a decree. When you read in Revelation 13, when the Antichrist is sitting on his throne in full power, and he has the mark of the beast that's now put out on the whole world, that to me is the trigger for for this huge persecution of the saints that we read about in Revelation 12:17 and Revelation 14:12. So I believe right now that these seals, although maybe a couple of them may be open, but I do not believe that all of them have been opened yet. In fact, really, at where I'm at right now, I don't believe any of these seals have opened yet. And I believe when they do, after the either an NWO comes in or the great RESET takes in effect, and countries lose their sovereignty, and then we are somehow ran the whole world is ran by basically 10 entities, the 10 kings of the earth, so to speak, that we read about in Daniel. Um, I believe that has to happen first. And then from the 10, we know that one comes up, rises up, a little horn, which we can equate that to the Antichrist. Um, I've got one thing in here I was going to just discuss briefly, and I think I'll get to that, but I want to talk about a key event because I did say that. What is the key event for us to know when the countdown begins? The bottom line is we know in Revelation 12 and Revelation 13, we have basically three dates or three timelines that all coincide with one another. We know that the Antichrist is going to rule and reign for 42 months or 3.5 years. We also know in Revelation 12 that when there's war in heaven and the angels, the bad angels, if you will, Satan and his minions, they are going to go after Yeshua's bride, which is us. It says for a time, times, and half a time. And if you look at time here as a year, times is 2 years, that's 3 years, and half a time, that's 3.5 years. We also know later that we see that it's for 1,290 days, which is 3.5 years. And this is why I think it's important for us to understand when we're reading the Bible. I have another teaching on that about studying the Bible based on chiastic structures. And I'm not going to go into that today. If you go to our website on Return of the Remnant and go to our teachings page 2, I give a pretty good teaching on how to connect the Messiah, Yeshua, with the prophet Jonah. And I do a little bit of that through chiasms. And again, I don't have the time today to go through all that, but if you have time, go through and take a look at that teaching. I believe that's a PowerPoint. And I'm not sure if I have that loaded up onto the YouTube channel. I'll have to look at that after this is done, and maybe I can get that out here soon. But you come to find out that God is teaching us things within chapters, within a few verses, where things seem to line up, and then there's this central axis of what He wants to teach us, and it's all throughout the Bible. So I know I'm jumping around, but let's get back to Revelation 6. One thing I was going to talk about, when you see the fifth seal in verse 9, we know that's martyrdom. And then here when we see the sixth seal, when the sixth seal was opened, there was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red. And no, this is not going to happen. This sixth seal is not going to be this eclipse. It's not going to be this eclipse. All these other things have not happened yet. There's an order in the events that happen, and other things have not happened, in my opinion, yet. And so what we're going to see, or what many people are going to see Monday, is not, I repeat, the sixth seal. But I find it very interesting when it says, the stars in the sky fell to earth as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. To me, when you tie this in with Revelation 12, I believe that at the sixth seal, not only are there things happening on the earth, there's going to be a shaking in the heavens a war in heaven, as as we read about. And this is when Satan and his angels fall like figs from a fig tree onto the earth. Just my opinion, could be wrong. So, again, as we look at these things, I really want to just address the people who very much believe in the pre-trib rapture. And I'm not going to I'm not going to debate you on it, because your mind is probably already made up on it. But here's what I want to say to those who believe that you will be raptured out of here before any pain or suffering comes along or persecution comes along. The Bible is our guide, and we see several several characters in the Bible who were tested, who were persecuted. We know that Abraham was, Isaac, Jacob, King David was, all the prophets of Israel, Mordecai in the book of Esther, several of these. And so, and then all of, not only Yeshua, but all his disciples, you know, we know that, Peter was persecuted, and Paul, I mean, so because of that, what makes us think any different that we're not going to be persecuted as well? But even so, as I said before, I'm not going to go into a lengthy debate on this at all. But all I want to ask you is, if you are wrong, do you have a plan B? Do you have a plan B? And I would strongly encourage you to continue to, if you haven't already done so, to continue prepping, get yourself ready. Um, because, hey, it'd be great if we all got raptured out of here. I think it would be wonderful. But from the way I'm seeing it and reading it, I don't believe we are. And all I'm just saying to each and every one of you who believe in the pre-trib rapture, please just get yourself ready physically, mentally, and spiritually. Prep, get ready, so that even if you're right, then it wonderful. You just left the blessing behind for somebody else. But if you're wrong, at least you'll you'll have some endurance. You'll still have something to continue pressing on. Because I've heard a lot of people say, including some preachers that are dead set on the pre-trib rapture, that they have said, "Hey, look, you know what? If God doesn't come to rapture me out, then I'm just going to stop believing." And you know what? Maybe that is what's talked about as the great falling away. So, um, so let's talk about one of the key events in Revelation, and also not just Revelation, but what we read about in the Brit Hadashah several times. We know right now, I'll mention this as a backdrop, but we know right now that there's a lot of emphasis on the red heifer in Israel. And I'm not going to go too deep into all the history of that, because I'm sure many of you on this channel have already looked into this. Now, the red heifer sacrifice, according to Judaism anyway, you do not need an altar. You just need a stack of wood to burn the red heifer on. It has to be in a clean place outside the camp, which is going to be on the Mount of Olives, which, by the way, I don't care. Um, this is one reason. This is one reason why the tabernacle and also the temple had to face east. Why did it have to face east? So that from the viewpoint of the high priest and also the throne in the Holy of Holies could look towards the east to the Mount of Olives, where one day God's Son, Yeshua HaMashiach, would be offered very close to the place of ashes by the miphkad altar on the Mount of Olives. And you can go into Hebrews and see that there's an altar that the Levites had no basically no jurisdiction over, if you will. They did it in the temple, but they did not in this area. And this is where Yeshua would have been crucified on the Mount of Olives. And we know that there is a place on the Mount of Olives right now that is designated for the burning of the red heifer. And it is important that this happens in Judaism, because in order to do any offerings or sacrifices eventually on the Temple Mount, you have to have biblically clean Kohanim, and you have to have a priesthood who is clean, uh, and so here we have the ashes of the red heifer, and then we have a priesthood that will be consecrated or sanctified with the ashes of the red heifer. We'll also have the people of the land who can be sanctified when the time comes. And I also believe, I could be wrong here, but I also believe that the implements of the tabernacle will also have to be sanctified. And my wife and I have been to Israel several times. We've been to the Temple Mount Institute. They have basically every piece that's needed for service to begin up on the Temple Mount. If they ever got the Temple Mount within a day, they could have the altar, the brazen altar set up. They, back in 2009, they were down in the Dead Sea region, and they pulled out unhewn, uncut stone that's needed to build this altar. Also, keep in mind that you don't have to have a temple for this to function. You need to start off with a brazen altar. It has to have the normal Tamid offering, the daily sacrifice of the morning and evening. That's called the Tamid, the continual burnt offering. And after 7 days, on the 8th day, in the 8 in Hebrew basically means new beginnings. And on the 8th day, it is now a functioning altar. And they could easily, up on the Temple Mount, have this, and I don't know how it's going to be done, whether something gets taken down, whether it's shared, which is still an abomination. I don't know how they're going to do it, but one day they're going to have an altar up there, and they'll be in the process of probably building a tabernacle to house it. Well, you don't need to build a temple. You can start building one, but it'd be very easy and very quick to have a tabernacle built. And whether or not they find the implements of the tabernacle that Moses built, which there are some opinions on where it could be located at. I'm not so sure if they would use something like that. But it wouldn't take very long for them to get the brazen altar set up, to take the ashes of the red heifer, sanctify the priests, and eventually sanctify the altar, and then begin the offerings. And that, my friends, is going to be the key event before the Antichrist comes. Once we see that, we know it's just a matter of, to me, it's just a matter of weeks or months before the Antichrist gets to a point where he comes into the temple or the tabernacle, the Mishkan of Elohim, and he's whether he sits down or he stands in a place he's not to be and proclaims himself to be God, then that right there basically kicks off, I think it kicks off the fifth seal of persecution of the saints, and the mark is now put out. If you take a look, I've got a few scriptures here. Daniel 9:27 is probably one of the hardest scriptures to understand, and I don't pretend to know the answer, but it does kind of flow in line with several other authors in the Bible. But in Daniel 9:27, it says that he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So keep that in mind. Daniel 11:31, it says, and arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that makes desolate. Yeshua in Matthew 24, when he's talking to his disciples, he says, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, then, whoever's in Jerusalem, flee to the mountains. We also have Paul in 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4 says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And so just some of those verses there is my opinion. Whether it's, I don't believe it'll be a temple. A temple will take a long time to build, but he will be in the Kedoshim. He will be in the holy place at the very least, the Kadosh Kedoshim, or he may just walk right back into the area that it'll be sanctified as the Holy of Holies, and he may sit on the Ark of the Covenant that the Temple Institute made. I don't know how that all is going to play out, but I believe something like that's going to happen, and that is definitely going to kick off that 3.5 years that we read about in Revelation 13 and also in Revelation 12. But I know I rambled on a little bit, but one thing I want to leave you with as a takeaway, I want to go to, I don't know if I have it up. I'll type it in real quick. If we go to Matthew 24, because one of the first things that Yeshua tells his disciples is be deceived. Even the elect could be deceived. And no, we're not talking about past presidents or elitists. We're talking about the bride of Messiah, that even we could be deceived. And one thing he says, if those days, starting in verse 22 of Matthew 24, if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. Praise God. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here's the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, here's the Messiah, here he is, here he's out in the wilderness, do not go out. Or here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. And this is what I want to leave you with, because there's going to be great deceptions. There could be a deception of an alien, an appearance of alien beings from another planet saying that, hey, we seeded you, we're your creators. We could see something like that. And Yeshua is basically telling us, hey, look, don't be looking on earth or anything like that. He says I'm going to do something that nobody's going to replicate. There's going to be something in the sky that everybody on this planet is going to see at the same time. It will be so magnificent and fantastic. Nothing will be able to replicate it. And so if you hear anybody say, hey, look, the Messiah's over here or there, he's not going to be seen on the ground. He will first be seen in the air as something totally spectacular and awesome that cannot be replicated. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that we can look at. If you see some creature in a alien spaceship or whatever coming to Earth, it ain't it. That ain't it. It's more than likely a great deception of the angelic beings of the demonic realm, something interdimensional that is going to appear. So don't believe it. Don't believe it. And just want to reiterate before we go, it's just my opinion, but be in prayer. Be in prayer on Monday. If you got to go to work on Monday, be in prayer before you go, and ask the Lord for guidance in that day, and just make sure you get right with the Lord. I hope and pray this little talk we had today was good. If you got any questions or comments, please put that in the comment section. And again, I hope to see you guys another week or so. We'll try and get some more teachings out there. Until then, have a great Sabbath.